So we'll quickly take any comments from the public for those who are here. So we do a lot, 3 minutes for public comment, but I'll actually give you longer if you need longer. Would any of the members like to provide public comment today before we dive into some of our presentations?
Could it be an announcement?
Sure.
This is my first one of these.
Yeah.
So I'm Paul Slentz with Tennessee Interfaith Power and Light, and we're going to be having a conference on November 1st about at Second Presbyterian Church, and it's going to be focusing on houses of worship, how they can be more energy efficient, how they can be better stewards of their grounds, and thirdly, how they can have cleaner operations and events.
Great. So I'll just repeat for the recording, there's going to be an energy efficiency workshop for houses of worship November 1st.
Second.
And reach out to Paul if you'd like more information. Thank you.
But it's more than energy efficiency. It's sustainability.
Sustainability.
It's about all the things, the pollinator gardens and everything, so.
Great. Wonderful. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and Aaron to give us a quick update on our Renewable Portfolio Standard dashboard. So I think this is notable because when we first convened, one of the topics that you all expressed an interest in is better understanding how we were performing with regards to our Renewable Portfolio Standard. And so this is a great tool that I think is going to do exactly that. And we'll make regular updates to that as well, so that everyone and anyone can have a better understanding of how we're performing. So hang tight while I do a quick switch here. Such anticipation. Too many windows to minimize.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just have I'll get started while Kendra pulls that up. Hi, everybody. Jennifer Westerholm, Assistant Director of our Division of Sustainability at our Department of General Services. Nice to see you all again, and really excited to provide you all with the world premiere of our Renewable Portfolio Standard dashboard. Before I do that, I do want to acknowledge many of my team is here today, so really appreciate others from our team joining. And Erin Mello here is really the brains behind this dashboard, so if there's technical questions, she'll be able to help answer those. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that today is Freddie's birthday. Freddie. Happy birthday. The whole Sustainability Advisory Committee. Just where he wants to be. So you're good. So I think, as Kendra mentioned, our Renewable Portfolio Standard, this is something that, as you all will remember, in 2019, our City Council unanimously passed legislation instituting the first RPS for the City of Nashville. It's for our municipal operations. So it essentially requires all the electricity used by city government operations to be offset by renewable energy. And it's over a 21-year time frame. So starting in 2020, and each year there's stair-step goals to get to our end goal, which is that by 2041, we want all our electricity use to be offset by Tier 1 renewable energy resources. Tier 1 is solar, wind, landfill methane gas, geothermal, kind of what you think of as traditional renewable energy resources. So we have that RPS mandate, and so what we haven't had up to now is a really kind of intuitive, visual way and public way to track and show where we are in our journey toward that goal. So that's what we're premiering tonight. And then before we dig in, I also want to kind of contextualize for y'all. Of course, we have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which I think we shared with you last meeting. And as you may remember, for municipal operations, which is what our RPS applies to, most of our greenhouse gas emissions are associated with energy use. So it may be energy use from our facilities and buildings, in our water and wastewater treatment operations, our street lights and traffic lights, things like that. But the lion's share of our GHG emissions does come from energy use, and most of that is electricity. So when we talk about offsetting our municipal electricity use with solar and with wind and with other renewables, it has a really big impact on our overall greenhouse gas emissions. So it's pretty important. And I think, okay, you guys can see it on your monitors as well. So I'm just gonna kind of run through this and show you what we've got, again, as part of our public-facing tool to track our progress toward our goals. So this chart here on the left is essentially our denominator. If we want to offset all of our electricity consumption with renewables, we have to know how much electricity do we consume. So we have 4 kind of sectors here. The top pale orange is our city lights. That's street lights and traffic lights. Next, we have Metro Nashville Public Schools electricity consumption. Under that, in the darker orange, is general government electricity use. So that's going to be most of your typical city agencies. There are a few independently operating agencies like Airport Authority, Convention Center that aren't included in that general government bucket. And then finally, there on the bottom in gray is Metro Water Services, which is part of general government, but they use so much energy, we just wanted to break it out for you separately because they're our biggest energy consumer within city government. So what we've done here is you're seeing actual electricity consumption for 2019 through 2024 based on our utility bills and our benchmarking and all that. And then starting in 2025 and all the way to 2041, you're seeing projections. So top line, city lights, we're in the process, as you probably remember, of converting all of our street lights over to LED. And so what you see there is once that project is finished, we have actually less electricity consumption from our city lights than we did before, which is excellent. For the next line, schools and general government, we're assuming a 3% annual increase in electricity consumption, which we think is a conservative estimate. In other words, we're hopefully overestimating how much that will go up. We hope it's less than that, and we hope that our efforts at energy efficiency will mitigate that, but we want to kind of overestimate there. And then finally, for water services, we talked to water services, so there's about a 10% increase in their electricity use between 2026 and 2032, and then after that it kind of levels off, and that's just based on data they provide, or projection data that they provided us. So bottom line, this shows us on an annual basis what's our denominator, how much electricity are we using, and so therefore how much do we have to offset with solar and wind and other renewables. Then the fun part is how are we doing in meeting our goals? So this chart over here on the right shows us, we'll toggle back and forth, but it shows us how are we doing in meeting our percentage goals. So like I mentioned, every year the legislation requires that we meet certain targets. So for 2025, for example, 35% of our electricity consumption is supposed to be offset by Tier 1 renewables. We're not quite there yet, as you can see, but the goals continue to go up every year. And so that's what this upper line here is tracking, all the way up to 2041, when again, 100% should be offset. So what you see down below is this bottom line here, or this bottom part of the chart, the gray, is Tennessee Valley Authority and what they are producing, what they are putting on the grid, and what percentage of the electricity we're sort of inheriting from TVA is Tier 1 renewables. And we can see different scenarios. So TVA's current integrated resource plan, we looked at kind of an average case for renewables, and then a maximum and a minimum. So right now we're looking at average, but you can also see what it would look like if TVA got really aggressive with renewables, and how that changes the wedge, or if they were kind of less invested in renewables over time and how that impacts our kind of delta or gap there. This blue section is our solar, like Metro's solar, and it's a combination of two things. Solar, and I say solar, it's renewables, but it's primarily solar. Jason's smiling. So this is solar energy that is on Metro sites, on rooftops or ground-mounted solar on and at our facilities. It's also renewable energy credits that we're purchasing from offsite solar or utility scale solar throughout the region. So you can kind of see like right now in 2025, we have, you know, 1.4% of meeting 1.4% of our overall goal with on-site solar, and then TVA is contributing 4.8. But as we go up, you can see this big spike here. We're working with NES and TVA on a couple of larger scale, utility scale solar investments. And so once those come online, that'll bump us way up. We'll almost reach our goal in 2028. And then of course we'll need more. We'll need more and continued investments both for on-site and renewable energy credit solar. And I want to show you one other view that I think is interesting. So that looked at percentage toward our goal, but we can also look at it in a slightly different way, which is how much renewable energy capacity do we need to meet that goal? So this looks very similar, but here the line is showing essentially how many megawatts of renewable energy we need to meet our goal based on our electricity consumption model. So in 2041, we estimate we need 568 megawatts of tier 1 renewables to offset our usage. And here you can just see same thing. This is TVA. This is the light blue is renewable energy credits, and then the darker blue is installed solar. We've made some projections here too with the installed solar, estimating about a megawatt per year of new renewables on site at Metro facilities. That's pretty aggressive based on history. We haven't kept that pace so far. However, in the next year, I think we're going to see about 4 megawatts come on board because of the investments that the current administration has made through the capital spending process in putting solar on Metro buildings. So if we continue to see investments like that, we'll be able to continue to make really rapid progress in terms of on-site renewables. One last thing I wanted to share is, you may remember at the last meeting, we looked at our solar production tracker. It's still here. You can get to it right here. So if you want to dig into the, again, on-site solar on Metro properties, you can access that through this same dashboard. And this may look familiar, but here you can look at solar on different agency properties. You can look at it visually with a map. Month-to-month production, individual sites, and all kinds of wonderful granular data to dig into. So I think with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments. Linda.
You knew I would have questions. First of all, excellent, let me see.
Just remember to use your mic. There you go.
There we go. First of all, excellent presentation as always. You're great at taking really complicated data and making it very digestible. So thank you to you and your team. I have a couple of questions. I'll just throw a couple out, let other people ask questions as well. One, I'm curious, just given the constraints with TVA, which is investing in nuclear, right? Not as much in renewable energy, and the limits on what NES can provide. Like, what would be the dream scenario? Like, is it even possible to get to those goals? And what would that mean in theory? Like, how much of an investment in rooftop? How much of an investment in credits? I'm just trying to sort of understand, like, is it doable?
I mean, I think it's doable. in the sense of we've seen, you know, through the Green Invest program, which is the TVA program to allow larger customers to invest in, you know, large scale utility solar, the opportunity to purchase large amount of RECs, which is like, as you can see here, really gonna help us meet our near-term goals. And then I think through kind of public-private partnerships, you know, working with private entities who are interested in perhaps, you know, supporting the city's goals and purchasing green energy for their own, you know, goals, but then perhaps donating some of the RECs to us. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to work with the private sector in partnership to help them help us.
Okay.
Meanwhile, in the background, well, not in the background for us, because it's something like we do every day, but I think if we can continue to see not only capital investments in solar like we have seen recently, but we're leveraging contracts that allow us to do like a solar services agreement where we're not paying a huge capital outlay, but over time paying for solar on new buildings, and we're seeing that we can do, you know, 3, even 4 times as large an array on city buildings than we could if we had to sort of outlay the capital upfront, because we're paying for it over time. So I think we have some funding mechanisms that are allowing us to do a lot more.
Right.
But, you know, solar on rooftops alone will not get us there, so we have to continue investing in these large scale opportunities, whether it's us directly buying the renewable energy credits or partnering with, you know, private sector kind of I guess beneficiaries to help us
That's
get
super helpful. And the other question I wanted just to ask is, do you have a sense of how we compare to other comparably sized cities in terms of where we're getting, you know, our percentage renewables?
No, I don't, but I'm happy to look into that. I know there are many cities that have RPSs even more common for like states, you know, like at a larger scale. I only know there's a few like smaller city success stories. I want to say like Boone, North Carolina has like met its, you know, 100% goal for like years. But yeah, I haven't looked into like Charlotte and some of our bigger cities, so I'd be happy to do that and report back.
Thank you so much, really interesting.
Thank you.
Can you speak to anticipated reductions in renewable energy production in the future? Particularly, I mean, if this goes all the way out to 2042, can you speak to the plans for that and thoughts on that?
Can you restate it one more time? Anticipated reductions in
renewable
production?
energy production?
Do you mean, you don't just mean like the panels get less efficient over time?
No, I mean less investment in solar and wind, tax incentives disappearing, all of that that's going to lead to less renewables in the future than we had anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, on a macro scale, I definitely see that as a large issue. I think for us in Metro, you know, being able to take advantage of the investment tax credit and other things has been kind of icing on the cake. Like for the current projects we're working on, we got the full capital allocation, and then we will hope to receive, you know, 30, 40, or 50%, depending on the project, back from the tax credits. But we can do it regardless because we have the capital available. So I think for us, it won't be as big of a shock. We also have really great local, you know, solar companies that, you know, at least for now are like doing great and sourcing things and figuring out alternate paths to kind of get around, you know, tariffs and other things, and not to get around, to cope with the tariffs and other obstacles. So I feel like we have the political will, we've had good funding and or alternate funding mechanisms through like solar services agreements, and great talent locally that's gonna allow us to continue to thrive. But I don't know, on the macro scale what that'll look like, and I do think it's a concern.
Yeah, I think what I've heard in the solar production industry is that pipelines look good through 27 or 28 or so, and then after that, it's a question mark. And so I'm glad to hear the commitment no matter what, and the capital available no matter what. As far as, you know, purchase solar and TVA, I wonder how that would affect the long-term projections.
So, in a second to collect my thoughts, like there's a lot that I'm thinking about. But I'll first say, as Ms. Bregan said, great presentation. You guys do a great job. I think If I could choose to spend my birthday here too, I would do the same thing. I feel like the RPS begins today, right? I mean, to me, it was a thing we got past was great, but now we can actually see where we actually are and we can start making plans and thinking about. I think this should be foundational to this committee and how effective we are. How do we get, how do we make that a reality? We see that black line and that's our goal. And we see how far away we are from it. Can't, manage what you haven't measured. So, question is about possibly that black line. Is there anything that we can do to affect that black line? So as much as I want all the solar in the world, and everybody here probably knows that, are there ways that we can be more efficient and move that line closer to where we are?
Absolutely, yes. And so, right, like, as I kind of discussed, the chart on the left is our denominator. And so to the extent we can decrease our energy consumption, our electricity use, we can lower our denominator and we can have a much easier time of meeting our goals. And so that's why, our team does focus on this, but we have just as strong and as aggressive a focus on energy efficiency in buildings. And you guys may remember, but in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we showed that, energy consumption, both in general government and especially across Metro Nashville public schools, is trending in the correct direction. MNPS has done fantastic work around their energy efficiency in their schools. So those efforts are hand in glove, and really, those are foundational. Like the energy efficiency comes first, then you do the solar to meet what you need to meet. So this is certainly not done in a vacuum, and certainly, and we have other mandates that require energy efficiency improvements and LEED zero energy and things like that. And so we're working on those as well. And Swapnil Patil, who is our newest employee, the energy efficiency manager, and so that's kind of his goal is to look at, for us, the general services portfolio of about 100 buildings, figure out, looking at energy audits, conduct more if we need to, but just look at where those fast ROI, significant opportunities for energy conservation measures are to really drive down our consumption.
Awesome. I actually keep the production tracker open on my computer. It makes me feel smarter. I really do.
So cool.
But I will say that we have this scenario with the TVARP, not to give you more work, but just thought. Is there a way to do that with good, better, best with energy efficiency scenarios in the future?
Yeah.
Just a thought. Thank you, though.
Our data expert Erin says yes. So I'm gonna say yes.
We'd have to develop the models for it, but in theory, yeah, that's something we could improve on it.
Yeah. And she was saying we could develop some models and could improve upon that over time. And one thing we could do too is we do have in ordinance some goals around improving energy efficiency, certifying a certain portion of our building stock as LEED zero energy, and so maybe kind of overlaying some of those, maybe actual progress, but also those energy efficiency goals, overlaying that. I can see the wheels turning.
The juices are
for
flowing.
her. I don't know how to make it happen. But yeah, I love that. That's a really great point. Thank you, Jason. Certainly not in isolation, but hand in glove with energy efficiency.
Apologies if you said this already, but I'm sorry.
Okay.
But can you speak to the jump in 2026 and what we're expecting to happen there that creates that, and then why we perhaps anticipate it kind of flattening after that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right here, it's actually, we'll see the impact in 2028, but in 2027, we expect 2 large-scale, utility-scale solar projects to come online, and benefit, and essentially give us a whole bunch of recs that will help us. And so that energy will actually be realized and produced by 2028. So that's what helps us jump off. And then it pretty much just stays flat because we would need more of those types of projects. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Is this red because it's on or not? Okay. Flip side to Linda's question, what are the biggest hurdles to getting closer to our target?
I think, having a partner in TVA that is also kind of looking at, sustainability across the region and prioritizing that will be really important. The more they do, the kind of the less we have to do, and that's true of all the cities that have these sustainability goals in the valley. And then I guess I would say, you know, funding can be a challenge. We've been lucky in recent years to receive significant, really historic funding. But I think too, kind of what Joe talked about there with just, you know, the current political environment, the uncertainty for producers and providers and manufacturers and things like that just creates a lot of uncertainty as far as, you know, moving forward and in a really robust way. But I'm hoping that, you know, from an international scale, like I think we've reached a tipping point with solar and other renewables where like they are affordable, they are reliable, they've proven their muster. And so hoping that, you know, even if we have a few steps backwards here in the States, that like internationally and globally we'll continue to move forward. And the market will just drive it forward regardless of those incentives and things like that going away. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Because it's not public quite yet.
Yes, sure. Just one last thing is it's not public quite yet, which is why this is the world premiere. So this data will be being updated monthly, so it'll be fairly current whenever you visit it, but we will share the public link when that's available, and that should be within the next month or so.
Shortly after Labor Day.
Yeah, shortly after Labor Day. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Erin, for all your work on this great tool. Again, I feel like it's an important moment for this group because I very distinctly remember Jason asking for something like this.
Yes.
And I know we've done presentations, but it's like a manual update process, and so having something like this is, I think, so impactful. So next up, we're gonna transition topics a little bit. So another topic that I think has been of interest to this group is better understanding how we prepare for extreme weather events and other natural hazards. And it just so happens that we are in the midst of updating our hazard mitigation plan. And so I'd like to invite up from our Office of Emergency Management, Heidi Mariscal, to tell us a little bit about that update process. So Heidi, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Mm.
First of all, thank you, Kendra, for inviting me. I love talking about this stuff. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in emergency management for about 22, 23 years now. And the mitigation plan is just one small piece of it, but to me, it's a very important piece of it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and we're just gonna get right into it. And please feel free to ask any questions along the way. So first of all, the hazard mitigation plan that we have, it is multi-jurisdictional, which means it includes all of our satellite cities, any of the universities can join, which several have, and other agencies as well can participate. This is a multi-agency plan, so that means it's not just Metro. We include outside agencies as well, public, private, nonprofits, you name it, other government agencies across the state. And we also include National Weather Service, US Geological Survey, Cumberland River Compact is a part of it. So again, we like to keep it wide open because we don't want to get tunnel vision. And it's multi-hazard, so it's not just weather, even though weather is, you know, probably one of our biggest threats that we see almost all the time. It's very weather heavy, but it is not just weather, so it's a multi-hazard plan. In the plan, we also ask for public input. We're very open to public input. We've had a public input session already for this revision that we're currently going through. And also we put a public survey out asking for insight into what does our community think are our biggest hazards and what mitigation steps can they think of that maybe we're not thinking of. So we're open to those conversations. And so we've gotten several hundred surveys back. It was all done online. We did as much of a push as we could out there. And I'm very happy because we have a pretty good mix of our community that respond. And lastly, This plan is actually, it's officially adopted by all jurisdictions that take part in it. And it's submitted to state emergency management as well as federal emergency management. And then once it's approved, then we're good and we can get access to hazard mitigation funding at the federal level. So this is tied to federal funds. So within the plan, I'm not gonna go through every little thing because the plan is pretty massive. You can get to the plan on OEM's website. In the planning section, you can read all of it if you'd like, but it's big. But I'm just gonna highlight just a few of the sections within the plan that I think would be of, that you would be interested in. So the community profile, what we do is we take the information from Metro Planning, the GIS planning sectors, and we gather all that data and then we get some stuff from the census and we kind of put a hodgepodge of really interesting stuff for our community, so that everybody knows how diverse it is and how it's laid out, kind of set the stage for the plan. Then we do a risk assessment and hazard identification. So I'll go through how we do the risk assessment here in just a moment, but we do go through as a community planning team, all of these different individuals that are a part of this, and we assess our different risks and then we come up with a formula for our threat level. So I'll go into that. But in the hazard identification section of the plan, we actually go into a semi-deep dive of the different hazards. So we don't just say, oh yeah, winter storms is a hazard. We say, well, okay, what do we see? What can we see? What could we see? And what can we, try and mitigate with that hazard? So we go into a little bit of a deep dive in all the different hazards that we identify. And then we also go into vulnerability and consequence assessments for all the different hazards and Metro's capability. So obviously we cannot put every single capability that Metro has, but we do try and capture some of the bigger items, kind of like, again, if I start with the winter storms, okay, what does NDOT have? What do they have to help with our roadways? Because that's like one of the biggest issues when it comes to winter weather around here is the roadways. So just as an example, that's kind of what we look at. And then the mitigation strategy is actually one of the biggest, most important pieces of this plan. And that is, okay, now that we know what the hazards are, what are we gonna do about it? And then the plan also has a bunch of appendices, historical information like the Weather Service. They'll dump a bunch of information in here for us. So we have historical references along with different maps. We have different planning maps. We have watershed maps, et cetera, all within the plan. So the hazards. So these are all of the hazards that we have identified for this revision process. They're pretty self-explanatory. Extreme temperature, cold and heat, those are two different hazards that we have. I just combined them here. But these are all hazards that we could or have faced here in Davidson County. So now that we get the hazards, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do an assessment on those hazards. And this is what I was gonna talk to you about. So there's a couple main parts and I'll blow them up for you here. So this is the impact and vulnerability parameters. So this is step one in coming up with our risk factor. So the parameters on the left-hand side, if you go down that left-hand side column, it shows you those are the parameters and then it gives you a definition. And then 1 through 5 is the rating that each of the planning team members would rate for that particular parameter. So for example, at the very top, geographical extent. So the definition of that parameter is the size of the affected area. Includes areas not damaged but strongly affected by the incidents. For example, areas backed up by a transportation accident. So let's say, somebody's yard got damaged and had hazardous material spill in it from an interstate incident, but it went out onto their yard. So just looking at the geographical extent of the incident. So that one in particular, you have 1 through 5, all the way from a single site to regional winter storms is a good example of that. So all of these different parameters are important in one way or another when it comes to the different hazards that we face. And so everybody on the planning team goes through and they look at all these different parameters and then they give it a rating, that 1 through 5 rating, okay? And then what we do, I'll go on to the next one. Then from there, we'll add everything together and then we'll come up with, this is an example, this is what we came up in 2019, which was the last one that is physically in the plan, even though we've updated it since. But this is what is officially in the current plan. So this will tell you, so for number 1, the geographical extent, it'll tell you, okay, for dam and levee failure, that's a 4, that's pretty high. Because the size, for the most part of that particular event, would be big if it did in fact happen. So you'll see all those 11 parameters up at the top and then the hazards going down on the left-hand side. And then you'll see the total all the way on the right-hand side. That's for all of the 11 parameters. So then we take this total and then we're gonna go into the likelihood parameters. So the likelihood parameter is self-explanatory when you look at that top table there. It has the measure and then the years, period in years, and then what you would rank it based on those. So if it's frequent or very likely, like a thunderstorm, okay? Yeah, that's probably gonna be a 6 because that happens all the time around here. There's several others that we could probably put pretty high up on this, but this kind of gives you an explanation of the likelihood parameters, and then the methodology is explained down below. So now that we have the likelihood parameters, now we're gonna take the impact of vulnerability number and we're gonna multiply that times the hazard likelihood to come up with our risk factor. And that risk factor is gonna tell us what hazards are our top concern. And so as you can see on that smaller graph, based on the risk factor, flooding, tornado, and winter storms are our top 3 hazards for Davidson County, which makes sense because we do get those quite a bit. All right, now we go into the mitigation strategy. Now the mitigation strategy, as I said, that's really the meat of the plan. That's gonna go through and kind of tell us, all right, what do we need to look at? What are we gonna do about it? So we have 3 goals: minimize hazard-related losses, increase community-wide awareness, and optimize the use of available funding, okay? So within those 3 goals, every single action item will fall into one of those 3. And then over on the right-hand side, we have the mitigation categories. So every action item is also gonna fall within at least one of these mitigation categories. In these categories, that kind of helps us so we can keep an eye on things. Are we not doing something in one area that maybe we should concentrate more on, and et cetera. And so all of the action items will connect with those 2. So I'll give you an example. First of all, this shows we have 32 action items currently. 16 of those action items, we just recently created a new section in the plan that's a recurring action item list. Because a lot of the stuff like Metro Water, for example, with flooding, they do it on a consistent basis. And so trying to update that action item all the time was just getting, it's like almost too redundant and it was just getting, too much. So we decided to create a recurring section, and within that recurring section, we'll update. It just won't be as frequently as all of the other sections because it is just a recurring item. So we have 32 action items in total. This is an example of just a blurb from one of the action items. For the most part, it's saying that we have experienced sinkholes and landslides throughout time. However, there's not one single agency tracking those specific geological events, which we should be tracking. So that's what this action item is. It's saying, okay, we need to create a process, create a central depository for capturing all of that information for landslides and sinkholes. So that's an action item. And that action item would go and fall under the landslide and sinkhole hazard, which is in the pie graph you see here. These are the top ones that we have currently it'll show that we have 41% of our action items are attached to flooding. So it's very flood heavy. This has been an ongoing process with the mitigation plan for many years. So here recently, I've been trying to get away from being so flood heavy and let's look at more of the big picture. So that's what we're doing lately, is we're trying to just really spread it out. One of the things we have new coming up in this next revision is public health and communicable diseases. We're put that in there, and they have a couple action items that they want to capture. But also we have two different sections. We have the multiple hazards. That means that it can be for not just one, and so we can't just capture it in one category. Or it can be attributed to all of the hazards. So like technology or something like that could be attributed to all of the different hazards. Then over here we have the category distribution, and this helps us look, okay, are we doing too much in prevention or not enough in prevention? Do we need to do more in infrastructure? What about policy? Okay, well, we have 4 action items that are attributed to policy. Do we need to look at that a little bit heavier? So that just kind of gives you an overview of what we're doing with these different action items. And then this on the bottom just shows the agency distribution. Again, water heavy, OEM, we're attached to a lot of different things for this. Planning, codes, ITS are all part of these different action items. And then finally, I don't want to go over my time. We do review our action items, the section for the mitigation strategy. We review that every year, and then we'll put a report on our website, just giving an annual report of the mitigation activities. And then every 5 years, that's where we're at now, is where we go through and we need to do a full revision and resubmit it to the state and the federal government. So that's where we're at now, and we're hoping to have that submitted in October. One thing I do want to say is I really appreciate the public participating in the survey because, I mean, when I was going through and looking at all of the response, there's some great thoughts out there. And, you know, that just really gets you away from tunnel vision and, you know, being in the governmental mindset. And it's like, okay, well, no, oh, well, we didn't think of that, you know, so getting the input from the public is crucial to this plan, I believe. So I'll entertain any questions.
I noticed when I wasn't here last time, it was a really short meeting. So you guys are probably really sad that I showed up. But first of all, again, like just such incredible information, and your sorting effort is truly impressive. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about sort of like just concretizing this, like how do you orchestrate this for like the budget process? You've got so many different entities involved, and do you have like a working group and you make sure that, you know, all of these things are funded and these policies happen? And I'm curious also to follow up on Joe's question earlier, are you looking at less funding at this point, and how are you going to handle that?
So one of the things I didn't show the full example of an action item, but in the plan we go into quite a bit of detail, and that includes identifying potential funding sources and who is the responsible agency.
Okay.
So the reason I say that is because let's say Metro Water wants to do action A. Okay, they're gonna put it in this plan and they're gonna identify, okay, well, this is probably something that we can do. We'll do that within our regular budget. Or we will look at mitigation grants, or we'll look at capital, or whatever the case may be. That's all identified as possible funding. We don't want to tie anybody to anything in the plan, but it's just, okay, we have this action item we want to do. Where are we going to find the funding and who's responsible for it? So that's how it's laid out in the plan. So it has the agency that's responsible and where the funding might come from. And we leave it up to that agency to go to the next budget step. So
I
if
see.
they do need to
Okay, no,
request something.
that's super helpful. And some of those agencies also have responsibility for some of the climate resilience and adaptation plan, and there seems like there's not a lot, but overlap.
Yes, yes. And that's one thing that Kendra and I are working on, is getting that integrated
Yeah.
more into
Yeah.
this plan, so.
And then do you have a sense of the federal funding situation or not yet?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't. I wish I could say, but if the future is what we're currently looking at, then I'm afraid that a lot of the federal funding would be sliced. And I'm not sure to what extent, but FEMA funding, mitigation funding, funding from like the Corps of Engineer, anything like that, I mean, it could all be cut up. You know, so that would just be where we would have to maybe ask for, you know, capital or
Yeah.
you know, other things.
Okay, well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
For the risk analysis and hazard identification, I know that you said that this is countywide or covers all of Metro and satellite cities and universities. Do you all go to the level of understanding kind of how hazards might present themselves differently in different zip codes or different geographies within those constraints?
So that's a really good question. We do keep that in mind when we go through the assessments. And we actually ask satellite cities, just as an
Sure.
example. You know, we'll ask, okay, Goodlettsville, what are you seeing when it's heavy rains? What are you seeing with this? And we actually work really closely with our satellite cities in that regard.
Okay.
So we do ask those that would give the ground truth and tell us where their problems are. But also looking back at different incidences, you know, we can see that's why that historical information is so important. So we can kind of see where things are going and go from there.
Just wanted to say that congratulations on doing such a deep analysis on particularly the multi-hazard element of the plan. That's really tough to do, as you already know. But I was curious about the climate adaptation mitigation strategies, and I noticed that there was only one. I think the number was one, but I want to hear more about climate adaptation and specifically nature-based solutions that you might be expanding on in the plan, or you're already thinking about as good synergies for the city and outside of federal funding, but just in general as a hazard prevention measure?
So we have not been able to dive deep into that yet, into the CARP yet, but that's something that we are hoping to do. And one thing about this plan is it's not set in stone. So we can, when we do the annual reviews, that's when we update the action items. So next year, if we're going through and we're like, okay, you know what, let's really dig into this now, and then we'll put that into the plan. So I'm definitely open to that, you know, the climate adaptation and stuff. I think it's just gonna take a little bit of time getting it going, so. But we have a good footing.
Just a follow-up question to that, is there separate funding for that plan, or is it all coming out of the same pockets?
You know, it would just be whatever the agency wants to do as their action item. There is hazard mitigation funding available out there, and that's what this plan is tied to. So after any presidential declaration, then they come through and they give some hazard mitigation funding available through grants. Most of that in years past has been used up for the home buyouts, so the flood mitigation side of it, because that just takes up so much funding. Most of that funding has gone to the home buyouts. So hopefully we'll continue to get those mitigation grants and we can expand a little bit more out, so. But yeah, otherwise it would be each agency making that request in their budget.
Just a quick follow-up, just a word of advice. My understanding is that if those action items need to be placed in your plan, hazard mitigation plan for federal funding to kick in eventually. So my only word of advice here is that let's put those in as quickly as we can, so that if an event does happen, you have that in your plan already and it can be funded.
Of course.
You know, so just.
Yes, of course. And we're not tied to what's in the plan.
Right.
So if we get funding, we can do something as long as we can, you know, justify it. Thank you.
So, I'll, Carolyn, kind of had my question because this time of year, 20 years ago is when Katrina happened. So that makes me think about geographies and most vulnerable folks. But I think you kind of already answered that question. So I'll ask this, since you're here, is there can you speak to like drills or a way that you inform the public that in the event of, this is what you should be doing? I don't feel like I know if there is one of those special top three. If there's, a flood, what should we be thinking? Or if there is, this huge winter storm, or, do you guys think about, I don't have a better word to know than, the drill for how you inform the public?
So, we do quite a lot of public information. So putting information out there, preparedness information. If this happens, do this, so on and so forth. Or our public information officer will put things out ahead of a potential event. Like if we're expecting severe weather, he might put something out that says, okay, get your kits ready, charge your phones, so on and so forth. So we do a lot of our public outreach. In regards to drills, we don't necessarily do large community drills. We'll support and assist all of the different organizations out there doing drills. So for example, Nissan Stadium just did a drill that we were involved in not too long ago. Bridgestone, they have one coming up that we're gonna be involved in. The hospitals and the healthcare side, they do drills that we participate in. So we're doing drills and exercises quite frequently, but we just, besides public information, spreading the information out, we go anywhere we're requested to go and talk or present or have a booth. We'll be at the Nashville Fair, come see us. And we're always going out doing public outreach as much as we possibly can. So if you have any suggestions on places we can go, people we can talk to get the word out, we'd love to. We love getting out there, so. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Heidi. And as Heidi mentioned, she's been on the road quite a bit and facilitating a lot of meetings. And so thank you for another night out presenting to this crew. Very important, I think, is and of great interest as evidence through the dialogue. A couple of things I'll note that we are working on that I think are responsive to some of the questions. Caroline, you asked about geographic specificity, and we've been having a lot of dialogues about the best way to use data that we have access to, whether that's publicly accessible data or more like proprietary data that might be curated by various consultants or platforms out there. And so there is, I think, a really robust dialogue about how we can better use data sets to help more precisely identify risk at the parcel level, for example. I think what we have found is that it's highly relevant for certain types of events, not as relevant for others. And so understanding the best use cases for that is really important. And then we're also trying to think through what level of data and information is appropriate for public consumption versus appropriate for like decision makers and people who are using it to plan in advance for different types of events. And then also, how do you interpret and share that information in a way that's meaningful for the public, but and causes, I think, enough attention to it, but not unnecessary concern. So just know that those are, I think, a lot of debates that we're having as a team. But it's absolutely something we've thought about, but are trying to figure out, again, the best way to present that information that strikes the right balance of communicating meaningful content, but not causing unnecessary concern in various circumstances. Just to touch on nature-based solutions, I think there are two very active conversations right now that either right now or that will be happening in the near future that I think are going to get a better handle on how we can better incentivize nature-based solutions. So today, those are things that Metro can do that the private sector can do that people can do at the residential level. I personally think we need to re-examine how we incentivize those. I would hazard to say we cannot require them, and even if we were to try to, I imagine the state would try to take that ability away. We're in the midst of a stormwater master planning effort. So you all might remember when Tom Pelko and Rebecca Doan came to speak with us. I think once we get through the end of that stormwater master planning effort, we're going to have a much better idea on kind of at the neighborhood level, really where we need to focus gray infrastructure, but also green infrastructure. And figuring out how to best financially resource that work is something we're actively thinking about today, knowing that I think the magnitude of that is going to end up being pretty significant. And so then the next question is how do you finance that? And so I think part of that is figuring out how to incentivize these more creative approaches. The second thing I'll quickly touch on is extreme heat. I actually just mentioned this today in a internal convening that we have across multiple different departments that touch the sustainability and resilience space. But something I'm planning to do is to convene representatives of a number of different agencies to talk about heat strategy. I've been meaning to do this for the past 2 years and just haven't had capacity to do it. But having a more strategic conversation about how multiple departments are touching this topic. And so I think that is also going to, point to some low-hanging fruit, probably some sharing of best practices or lessons learned that some departments are actively embracing and others could very easily be. It's just not something that's on their radar screen. But I think there's still a conversation about sort of what does that mean in terms trying to influence and incentivize the private sector, individual residents to do the same. So I wanted to quickly touch on that. And then also wanted to put a plug for a program that Heidi and her team administer called CERT training, which is Community Emergency Response Training. It is a program that you can sign up for. It is time intensive, not like getting another degree, but it is a significant multi-hour commitment where you can move through a combination of virtual online training and then in-person workshops to become a certified's the wrong word, but kind of certified community emergency responder, so that you as a resident would be equipped with more knowledge to be able to understand how to help perhaps your neighbors or others in your community respond in emergency situations. So just wanted to flag those things, and I know Heidi would be happy to share information with you about CERT training in particular if that's of interest.
Can you just, in relation to what you were saying about the funding, has the city looked into things like green bonds?
We have, I think, just scratched the surface a little bit on that particular topic. Ironically, as part of technical assistance that we will be getting through the program formerly known as Bloomberg American Sustainable Cities, we are probably going to be better unpacking that and understanding kind of what that means for city finances as a whole. I think part of the challenges of green bonds, there's a conversation that's happening at the state level, there's a conversation that's happening at the city level, and I think one step is figuring out whether or not there are any local entities who could potentially also be part of that picture. And then again, understanding how it affects the overall kind of financial health isn't the right word, but financial context of the city as a whole, relative to all the other financial instruments that we use. So I would say we're just starting that conversation.
Okay, makes sense. If you are ready to dig in at some point, I've been meeting and talking to people in the blended finance space that advise cities on that.
Awesome, thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Yes, if I could circle back to the stormwater
Yeah.
green infrastructure. We just passed a bill at the council level that changed the tree credit for preserving mature trees. But I would like to continue that work, and anyone that can provide me with data would be really great, just in terms of creating a meaningful incentive to builders to leave the mature trees that are there. We've had one, it's so low that no one has ever taken advantage of it, sadly. We have changed it a little bit, and I could get really wonky and tell you about that, but if anybody would like to work with me on following up with Metro Stormwater on investigating if the change that they've made has made any difference, and then continuing to make that a more meaningful reflection of what a mature tree actually does in terms of stormwater retention as a means of green infrastructure. And I would love for this group to both inform me in that and then provide backing if we can come back and, you know, in the not too distant future, improve on that legislation.
Any other final remarks or questions on the multi-hazard mitigation plan? Thank you again, Heidi. Really appreciate it. Great. So I'll round us out with a couple of brief updates from the Metro perspective. As a reminder, last meeting, our innovation team came to present to you all just to give an update on their work. So quick refresh, they're really focused on community-informed design and community engagement to sort of help solve some of the stickiest issues that we have as a city, with a focus on trying to look at the intersection of climate change and wealth equity issues. I think you'll notice, just one thing I want to be completely transparent with you all about is you'll notice some language changes on this slide, and that is, I think, a real acknowledgement and shift. That in order for this work to continue at the city level, the initiative itself has to be a little bit more flexible as to how it's presenting its work. And so I share that with you to say that we haven't necessarily shifted our focus, but how we're talking about that and how the initiative as a whole is talking about their work is much more focused now on prosperity, quality of life, and economic empowerment, still with a focus on infrastructure as well. So exciting announcements. You all met Robert James last time. He is obviously still our I-Team director, and I wish this team were with us tonight, but they're actually at a community meeting over on Jefferson Street tonight. So doing really, really good work out in the community and understanding how our community members will connect back to their work. Since we last met, we have onboarded our civic designer. Her name is Allison Hilgeman, and she will be really leading that co-creation work and engagement with our community members. She's engaged in a variety of different stakeholder mapping activities already, and is really trying to get her arms around the community landscape here, and where we have really critical stakeholders and subject matter experts that she'll want to collaborate with. And then Omar Ahmed is our data analytics manager, and he has already really sort of dug in and started looking at the data and really helping us understand whether our assumptions or suspicions about where we might need to be focusing our time and work actually reflect the demographics and the data that we see for topics in that community. So again, just kind of reminder, the way this team is going to work is they're going to take a very data-heavy approach. They're going to layer in some mayor's office priorities. We pulled together an application for this process that talked about a variety of different projects we might want to touch on, and then also some feedback that we've gotten early on. And so what has come out of all of that analysis is a desire to focus on reducing energy burden and increasing economic opportunity. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the term of energy burden, it is essentially the percentage or proportion of household income spent on energy as a utility. And so what I think is so interesting about that is that gives us a variety of different levers that we can pull on, right? We can try to reduce energy consumption, we can try to reduce the cost of energy, and then we can also try to increase economic opportunity or income levels. And so it gives us a lot of avenues for pursuing this work moving forward. Just wanted to provide a little bit more context as to why we've been interested in this area. Throughout sort of the second year of the O'Connell administration, there's been a real focus on affordable housing. And so this ties in really, really nicely with that priority area. Really from the start of the O'Connell administration, a key priority of his has been affordability and cost of living. And so again, direct ties with those areas as well. We like that this is really interdisciplinary, highly interdisciplinary. It allows us to work quite a bit across Metro departments who already touch this work. It allows us to work beyond Metro departments with a lot of our community-based partners, individual residents, commercial sector, as well as some of our intergovernmental partners like Nashville Electric Service, Tennessee Valley Authority. And we also think that we'll be able to see some quick impacts from this as well. So I mentioned that Omar's already sort of been hitting the data hard, and I wanted to share some of his early analysis with you all. And so what you see here is some quick snapshots of Davidson County neighborhoods with greater than 10% energy burden. So typically 6% or higher energy burden would be considered high. 10% is considered severely high. And so what you see here, the larger the dot, the more households within a region that do have greater than 10% energy burden, the bluer the dot, the more sort of the pure number of houses within that region that have higher than 10% energy burden. So I mentioned that this data analysis thus far is not sort of wholly focusing our efforts, but it really helps us home in on the areas where we might want to really start some of our interaction and target our interventions. Speaking of quick impacts, I wanted to provide an update on the Insulation for Impact program. So as you all might recall, Robert mentioned this last time, but it is a partnership that we are tackling with Nashville Electric Service, Tennessee Valley Authority, and NeedLink to look at insulating homes for the older adult community. And so this actually started out with a very, very small amount of money, $75,000. It's been matched several times by our different partners, and it looks like we'll actually be able to install installation in about 88 homes of the older adult community. I wanted to make sure that I shared with you all the context as to why we chose insulation. So there's an existing program called NES Home Uplift that looks at or it's actually NES and TVA Home Uplift that looks at energy efficiency retrofits within homes. And we chose insulation in particular because it's got a really great return on investment, both in terms of financial savings and carbon emissions reductions. And so wanted to play around with the idea that said, okay, if we know we need, between $10,000 and $12,000 on average to do a whole home uplift project, what would it look like if we tried to stretch those dollars out really far, because we only have a small amount, and went all in on one type of intervention? And so that's kind of the experiment we're working with here. And we had over 133 applicants who are moving through the process of actually kind of qualifying and verifying those applicants to make sure that they meet the income thresholds, but also the age thresholds that we established. And then our partner Clear Result will actually be doing some of those in-home energy assessments and further understanding whether or not those homes meet all of our requirements, or whether or not they need to be disqualified just to structural issues or other impediments that might make it really difficult to install that insulation. So really excited about that program. I think both TVA and NES have shown a lot of interest because it's sort of a remix of an existing program that might allow us to stretch our impact. And I think it's just been great for us to work together in that way as well. Going back to the I-Team, and the I-Team is directly overseeing that Insulation for Impact work. I mentioned before that Allison's done a lot of work in stakeholder mapping to really understand kind of who she needs to be engaging with. Something I want to go on ahead and put on y'all's radar screen is probably next week we'll be sending out a web-based form to you all with the different categories that are discussed in the research plan. And would love for you all, if you have time and capacity, to engage as subject matter experts. The way we'll set up the form is you can just kind of go through and select the topics that you would be interested in serving as a subject matter expert and or just somebody to talk about as a resident for these issues. So be on the lookout for that. We're starting to create community engagement materials as we get ready to actually interact and interface in our target neighborhoods. And then obviously we'll continue that data analysis to really make sure that we're doing work in the communities that need this the most. Wanted to quickly note this, it actually really flew under the radar screen from my perspective as a local government entity. I know it did under Jennifer's radar screen as well. But we actually adopted 2024 International Building Codes here at the local level. This happened in June, I believe, maybe July. wanted to note, and we're still looking into this a little bit further because there seems to be some interesting updates that happened at the state level after we adopted this, but it actually holds residential energy conservation code at the 2018 standard due to some state legislation that had been passed several years ago that said local governments cannot adopt anything that's more stringent than the state standard. So the state updated it from where it was, which is good, but it also said you can't go past this unless you get our approval. What's happened is we're trying to confirm whether or not actually the residential energy code was updated by the state this past legislative session, but after we filed this bill. So more to come, but either way, it's a significant improvement for us. Particularly from a commercial perspective, also from a residential perspective, because it does update a lot of those requirements for building more resilient and weather-resistant infrastructure, allows use of new technology, and then there are obviously some energy efficiency improvements there. So wanted to make sure that we called that out for you all, and I'm sure that's already incorporated into the update in the multi-hazard mitigation plan. And then also wanted to give a shout out to Donaldson Library. It has gotten so much recognition. I've listed 3 recognitions here. It was actually built and constructed by our General Services Department, so major shout out to the General Services team. But they have received a Green Good Design Award, a Governor's Environmental Stewardship Award, which will be actually celebrated about a week and a half from now. And then they were shortlisted for an International Library Specific Award. And so I've got a video here, and we'll see if it transitions through. Hang tight. Should there be sound right now? Probably.
The new Donaldson Branch Library in Nashville, Tennessee is a wonderful example of an environmentally friendly facility that has been built to meet the growing needs of the community. The facility spans more than 24,000 square feet of space across 2 levels. It includes 30,000 books and other library materials, 6 study rooms, 3 large dedicated spaces for community programming, public access computers, a children's area, a vehicle registration renewal kiosk, beautiful artwork, and much more. Sustainability has been a huge part of this project from the beginning. On the rooftop, a 33 kilowatt solar array uses the sun's energy to produce enough electricity to power about 4 average-size homes annually. Under the front lawn, a geo-exchange system uses 30 500-foot deep wells to harness constant underground temperatures, efficiently cooling the building in summer and heating it in winter. 1/3 of an acre of new green space, native plants, and outdoor seating offer a park-like setting to the community. Behind the library, a bioswale planted with perennial flowers and trees collects and filters rainwater to prevent runoff and protect nearby waterways. Inside the building, large, well-insulated windows provide plenty of natural light. Energy-efficient LED lighting and daylight sensors keep electricity use to a minimum. Passive solar design, including the breeze block which shades the facade, helps regulate interior temperatures by preventing too much heat gain during the warm months. High-efficiency plumbing fixtures reduce water consumption. Recycled building materials such as the steel structure, wall studs, and ceiling tiles save materials from the waste stream. Low or no VOC paints, flooring, insulation, and ceilings help contribute to the indoor air quality of the building. Educational socket signage throughout the facility highlights eco-friendly features. The library is certified LEED Gold, a very high standard of sustainable building and design. These sustainability efforts save money and natural resources, but also contribute to making the library a relaxing and inspiring place to read, work, study, and learn.
Okay. And so, wanted to end on that high note, and again, brag on Donaldson Library because it has received a lot of accolades and I think is a great project. So quickly close, our next meeting, is not until November, which feels really far away, but I know it's gonna be here tomorrow. And we'll be in this room again, same time. So that gets us through, our formal agenda. I don't know if there are any questions or any remarks that, any of our committee members would like to make. All right, with that, we'll see you in November.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.
Nice to get here.